Hello everyone, Arlisha here and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at some acrylic paint markers. I'm really excited to show these to you. I've been having a lot of fun with this medium. I've tried a few in a couple different brands, one of them being Arrtx here, and they did send me this set. If you would like to get one, maybe, possibly, as like a cool, fun prize gift thing, there's going to be a giveaway, so you can find the link in the description if you'd like a chance to win this set. It was pretty cool. The Arrtx people told me, hey, you pick a person however you want and we'll send them some markers. So if you think that could be cool to be that person and get picked, you can check the link in the description. These are similar, I suppose, most similar to like a Posca pen. They have a rigid nib and you do the shake and pump combo to start them for the first time, which is what you're seeing here. I'm doing the initial like pumpy pumps on it and then give it a little shaky shake and it, spreads evenly throughout the tip, which is interesting and fun to watch. The transparent barrel area is actually really cool. I like being able to watch the paint move. That's very satisfying and enjoyable. I'm pretty into the color palette on these as well. I don't often like it when art supplies have a specific color palette that isn't particularly neutral, but I'm digging it for these. And I feel like it represents accurately how I feel about these markers, which is it is maybe a bit more specific. I feel like there are some holes, some weird places where the color range could be better, but we'll talk about that a little bit once you've seen more swatches, which is where we're starting with now. It has been a long time since I've swatched like a whole range of things, and I was super pumped to do it here. I didn't think I wanted to do just like a couple scribble lines, and also they're not watercolors, so I'm not going to do like one flat wash across. And my brain settled on little wormy guys as the best possible outcome in this case. So my initial thoughts on the markers from these swatches was most of the colors, if not all of them, laid down pretty opaque after just one layer. Here on this yellow one, you can kind of see what it looks like if you have already activated the marker, but you don't shake it prior to an individual use. You will want to shake these before using them, even after you've started them, as the stuff kind of separates, So if I was to swatch that color just like that before I had shaken the marker, the color would have been a little bit darker and a little bit more streaky as everything's not really mixed together. So it's good to give them a shake first. And that could be indicative of like maybe not the best paint quality, which to be honest, I'm not expecting in a set like this. These are fantastic for playing in a sketchbook, laying down big bold color. I love acrylic markers for that sort of thing. They have that sort of graffiti feeling to them. Like it's the sort of thing you could use to just start putting marks on stuff, any kinds of stuff, paper, rocks, legislative facilities, rocks that you intend to project at legislative facilities. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but just in case, not to say that you should use these markers for such a purpose. You know what I mean. These are fun for laying down big, bold color. It's great, and I think they layer pretty decently on top of each other as well. So this paint is acrylic, I'm assuming, because that's what they're called, and that means that as you layer colors on top of each other, once a layer dries, it will be permanent. So you're not going to have reactivating of the color underneath. You're just going to be able to layer. I found that lighter colors layer really well over top of darker colors with these. And when I'm done with the swatches, we'll move into like a full example piece so you can see how I like to work with this medium in particular. And I think that the piece that I did illustrates pretty well the limitations that I found while working with these markers. I worked with a small kind of limited range when I was working on my final piece after the swatches, and that was intentional, but by the time I got towards the end of the piece, I realized that even if I hadn't picked a more limited palette, I would have been still a little bit more limited by these markers just because of how they sit in terms of value. Like, there are a lot of markers that ultimately end up being similar in value. So if you pictured a value scale with 1 being white and 10 being black, or 9. How far do value scales go? I don't know. We're going to say 1 and 9. So 1 is white, 9 is black, and then there's a series of increments of gray in between there, you know, from light to dark. I'm explaining it to you very specifically, but you're going to see it in a couple minutes because I did it. I couldn't help it. I needed to see it in my brain. So a lot of these colors sit in similar spots in like if we're looking at that 1 to 9 scale, the like 3-ish range and the 5-ish range, these markers tend to sit relatively similar in value. And then there's only, well, very few of them are exceptionally dark. There are a decent number of light-ish ones. Maybe I wouldn't have even noticed the kind of restricted value range on this marker set if I hadn't used like a toned sketchbook. I just couldn't resist once I thought of it. I thought that it would be a really cool way to see an opaque marker. And I don't think I've done that before. Swatch them on like a mid-toned paper. So it was really fascinating to do this, and I think it's a really great way to see their opacity as well. The markers come in like a cardboard box, and inside of that cardboard box are 2 plastic inserts that the markers sit in, and this is probably one of my favorite ways that I've seen markers, like larger sets like this, organized. I like the 2 plastic stands at the bottom as I find them really easy to move around, and I can either use them like this in the box, or I can take the stands out of the box and have the markers like just set up and displayed off to the side. And I really enjoy how it looks, and it's also super useful to be able to see them in that way. So I do really like that aspect of these. I was working on pretty much just this paper for this video, and you can see that there's a little bit of pilling where the marker is a little bit abrasive on the paper, but ultimately I didn't think it was any more than other acrylic markers that I've tried, and I've actually had Posca pens that have been more abrasive than this is on paper. So even though the tip on this one maybe is a little bit, I don't want to say harder than a Posca pen. That's not really what I mean. But for me, I looked at these and I thought that this tip might kind of pill up the paper or break down the paper a bit more than other acrylic markers I'd used. But it was great, and I really enjoyed using it on this paper. So I'm looking forward to using these markers on more paper. I think that this color range combined with the ones I already have does make a really nice range. You'll see when we get to the value chart that I laid out that that not only are the values kind of limited, but also the color ranges within those values feel limited. Ultimately, I felt like this set of markers leans pretty warm. There are a lot of warm tones, and even the cooler tones that do exist in the set are on the warmer end of that cool range. So you'll see the blues, the purples, the greens, they are there, but the ones that exist, they're a bit more on the warmer side. So you've got like blue greens, and the purples are a bit warmer, especially like once you get to darker purples, it's hard to find cooler colors in those darker ranges. A lot of the darker values end up being like earth tones or just warmer values, and I find that to be a bit limiting. You know, if I wanted to put in a darker tone that was still maintained like a coolness, I would have more trouble if I only had these markers, you know? And it's kind of similar for the lighter values. All of the yellows sit towards the mid-range value. They don't have a lot of white mixed into them, which is fine. You know, it gives like a cleaner pigment, like a more saturated color, but it does mean that a lot of the yellows can't be used for lighter applications. Like when I'm working on super light value ranges, I need to put down a light color. I feel like almost all of my options are going to be pink, you know, and that's not necessarily what I want all the time. So I do feel that I wish the value balance was more balanced. But swatches can be like a pretty tunnel vision way to look at art supplies. It's super important to like actually just get in there and like start using them and, you know, see how your brain problem solves with what you have. And it's a pretty good way to see the limitations of the markers, like just work with them how I would work with other things and make note of places where I feel restricted or places where I feel like I wish I had a slightly different color. I mean, looking at the swatches here, where's the dark blue? Show me to me, Rachel. Where's the dark blue? I don't see it. And like a truly dark green? Nah. And then the dark reddish colors, they look more brown. And I just feel like there are some colors that are really close to each other, and there are like 3 pinks here where I could have used just one of those pinks. And there's some browns here where I could have used just one of those browns and had more, diversity in other categories. So hopefully you can see what I mean here. Like, things are kind of grouped together in these 2 little pools. And when you're trying to work with just these markers, ultimately I feel like it could lead an artist to feel as though they were making a mistake, like that the artist was missing something. I felt that way before, where I don't necessarily realize that I'm being held back or that the supplies I'm using are limiting me more than my actual skill or my creative vision. It's just that there's like a piece missing in the toolkit and it's not as full as it could be, So that really does sum up my criticisms of the set, because other than that, I've really enjoyed working with them. I think the colors go down nicely. I didn't have any issues with any particular colors where I'm like, oh, I like all of them except for the way this one behaves, like I feel like all the markers acted pretty much the same, which even with watercolors, you'll get variety, like different colors having different amounts of transparency, or sometimes in particular sets, especially in like more student grade art supplies, things that are more for learning or for crafting or for fun. And I would put these markers in that category just because no pigment information is supplied. So we don't know specifically what's in the colors. Now, of course, the colors have numbers, but we don't know specifically the quality of the pigments and how light fast they're going to be, how color fast they're going to be. But we're definitely not getting that like full range of information and detail that we would expect from like a higher artist or professional quality product. And I mean, supplies not being light fast really doesn't necessarily mean they can't be used for professional work. I feel like that sort of strict categorization ultimately isn't really helpful for artists. I feel like you should know just what feels good to you. And it doesn't really matter what the quality of the thing is if it feels good to you, because art can exist in so many forms. So I'm redacting my previous ponderings about the quality of these, because really those sort of categorizations I'm kind of over. I'm kind of done with them. Like, you either enjoy creating with a supply or you don't. When it comes to like the like academic prestige side of art, I feel like we start getting into shoulds, like talking about what people should use or what they should like or how they should feel. And to be honest, I'm not interested in like feeding that fire anymore. So it's just about, do you like them? Do you enjoy working with it? Does it put you in the art zone that you want to be in? Does it help you to be in the frame of mind that's the reason why you make art? Oh yeah, I just decided to, instead of going the product review direction, we're going full existential and talking about like why we put marks on things, What are we trying to represent here in ourselves? And are your vehicles for that exploration aiding your meanderings, your ponderings, your introspective creative endeavors? Or are your supplies making that view cloudier, making it harder to see your vision, or generating negative feelings like shame or embarrassment because the supplies just don't hold up? That's how I want to talk about stuff. You know what? I'm super down for that, actually. All of that being said, I talked about the value range feeling restrictive, and I'm working in more of a specific color palette here. I decided to work with the pinks, purples, and a bit of yellow, and work in that way. When I started, I laid down some transparent alcohol marker just to knock the values in a kind of direction. It's really helpful for me to see a little bit of like an underpainting sort of situation, and then building on top of that is really fun. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I will go super saturated. I think that laying down sort of an underpainting layer that has super high saturation is a really fun way to work, because then you can leave little bits out and that sort of underlying warmth just is carried through the final piece. And for this one, I kind of wanted the opposite effect a little bit. I wanted to work on the opposite side of the color wheel with my alcohol markers from whatever range I was going to be working with for the acrylic markers. So my alcohol markers, the primary base background color is a greenish color. I can't actually remember if it was a green marker. And by I can't remember, I also mean that I can't remember like the footage that I just watched while I was recording this voiceover even to know what color that was. Anyway, I think I went with something greenish, and my intention there was to have the pinks really pop. I wanted it to feel sort of neon, glowy, ethereal, like the sort of thing that you would experience, or the sort of feeling you would have when you're driving down like a rainy city street and there's lights from, the city reflecting off of the street that's wet because it's raining. That's important. Yeah, that sort of feeling of like a hazy, neon, late night glow. That was kind of what was in my head. And that's as specifically as I've articulated it. Even when I was doing this painting, I wasn't thinking about that feeling quite so specifically. Like I hadn't really elaborated on it the way I just did. So that's interesting. But I was kind of keeping the feeling in my head, heart, brain, soul, stomach, possibly even. And I think it was around the time that I started working on the heart, which is more of like just purples, like there's less color range in that area, that I really started to feel restricted by the values. So in that heart section around the middle of the piece, like the lower middle, you can see that there's like a dark purple, a middle purple, and a lighter one. And they all just feel a little gray to me. That could be whatever the markers are made with. That could be from like whatever the markers are made with, whatever kind of pigments or other things are going on in there. But I didn't really feel like I could stick to just one color range and let it have the depth of value that I wanted. I ended up pulling in a little more pink to that area just because I needed more mid-tone stuff. Yeah, and feeling restricted in the values, I feel like ultimately makes this piece feel a little bit more like something that would exist in a sketchbook, more of a concept or a sketch, than something I feel like I could explain a full creative concept with. It feels just a little limiting to me. You can see when I'm laying in these little squid guys, little squiddy blobby guys, I don't know. I was working with some of the greens, and you can see that the two I laid down are pretty much identical in value. And that's one thing more than anything, I'd say that's the frustration. It's just that there's so many colors that are identical in value that when I'm using multiples of them, it doesn't really feel like it makes that big of a difference. Now, this can be really great if you want to work in a limited value range, which is an effect that I have found really inspiring and powerful lately, like working with a more limited range of values, but still a high range of colors can be really, really fun. Ultimately, though, it can have the effect of making a piece feel like it's not finished when you don't have those highest highlights and your darkest values. Again, not necessary all the time because the rules are literally all made up, but sometimes to the eye, that can be what's happening when you're looking at something and it doesn't feel quite done. It can be because the value range it's not fully established. I like working in that space sometimes, it's fun, but if you don't know that that's why it's happening, I can imagine that it could be frustrating for people who may just pick up these markers as a gift for someone else or for someone who's learning. You sit down, you're working with them, and somehow things just don't feel quite finished, or you feel like you wish you had a slightly different color, but you're not quite sure what it is. And in those instances, it might not actually be about color, it could be about value. So who knows how many times I've discussed value in regards to these markers, but I do think it's a good value, to get a set like this. You know, it's economical in terms of being fun, like the value per fun. I don't know. They're really fun. The funness is super high. And that's going to do it for me for these markers. Thank you so much to my patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see longer real-time videos and prints and stickers and that sort of thing, you can head over to Patreon. I do new sticker and print designs every month, as well as other fun stuff like coloring pages. And again, if you're interested in entering for a chance to win a set of these markers for yourself, you can follow the link in the description to enter. And that's all going to be down there in the description. Check it out. Thank you all for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye bye!